And look what we're talking about. We're still launching. So, January 2022, this is really when Polkadot's starting.
Hi there, and welcome to the Parachain Auctions podcast hosted by Kraken. I'm Brian Hoffman, crypto platform product lead. And on this show, you're going to hear from leaders and innovators from around the world building parachains on Polkadot and Kusama. Tune in for insights from the best and brightest about their new projects. Whether this is the first you've heard of parachains or you're a DeFi aficionado, come with us behind the scenes as we explore the technology of the future today. Today, we welcome back Dan Reecer, Chief Growth Officer at Acala. We've had Dan on the podcast numerous times now. Really enjoy it all the time. How's everything going, Dan?
Good. It's great to be back. You guys have done quite a few episodes since I came on the first time. And yeah, like always, appreciate all the coverage you guys are giving to the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystems.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to come talk with us. It's funny. I didn't realize we'd done so many, but I keep running into people, whether it's through interviews or meetups and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, I watched the show," and they usually mention the ones where you've been on because they've been very informative. I think it helps people understand what's going on in the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem a lot. So thank you for all the great information you've been able to provide for our guests or for our listeners.
Awesome. Yeah, of course.
I know we don't have a ton of time with you today, so I want to just jump right in and hear a little bit about what's going on with Acala. As most people will know, if they're following the space at all, you guys went to mainnet yesterday, so the tokens were transferable. Here at Kraken, we actually listed and people are actually out there trading. Last I checked, I think there were north of 200,000 holders of the token that got activated, so to speak, on the chain. Tell us about how that went. I know you were super busy over the last few days, and I'm sure it's still going on.
Yeah, it's been quite the end of the year and beginning of 2022. So I guess taking you back to the end of December and even towards November, of course, you guys have done a lot of coverage of the Parachain Slot Auctions. So that was a big bulk of work for us at the end of the year. And then that earned us the right to launch towards the end of December, along with 4 other teams. So 5 of us all launched our blockchain on that day, which meant that it was really just kind of an empty chain, but it was producing blocks on Polkadot. So that's when things really got started. But since we're launching entire blockchains here, it's not just a single day event where you can just say it's launched. So what we saw this week, just a couple of days ago, was kind of basically step 2 for us. So that was the enabling of token transfers, which meant that people can do what it sounds like, send and receive ACA tokens, and then begin to participate in governance and things like that. And this is really what kind of starts kicking things off. This is definitely not the end of the launch. We've got, I would say, 4 major steps ahead. So next week, we haven't announced this quite yet, but next week we're going to be launching the DEX and the first pair on the DEX. So if you remember back to the crowd loan, we created this product called Liquid Crowd Loan DOT so that people would be able to get some liquidity for their DOT that they loaned if they wanted to. So there will be an LC DOT and DOT pair launching next week on Acala Swap, our DEX. And then soon after that, things will really start kicking off around the stable coins. So the Acala dollar is a multi-collateral crypto-backed decentralized stable coin. And this will be able to be minted on Acala with collaterals such as DOT and Liquid DOT, and then cross-chain assets that will soon come to Acala, like Bitcoin and ETH, and then eventually things like Solana and Luna and things like that. So it's going to be really exciting over the next few months. The last thing that we'll be launching I guess the last protocol is our liquid staking product. If people want to stake DOT without a unbonding period of 28 days, and the ability to have liquidity for staked DOT. Because right now, I've been staking DOT for the last year and a half, and once you stake it, it's essentially kind of stuck there, not doing much. This LDOT product is going to be really cool because you can stake your DOT and then get this LDOT token that you can then go on and try to multiply or compound your yield with that. once these things are all set, this is really the foundation and kind of the bootstrapping of this kind of DeFi optimized blockchain. And then on top of that, we're building an EVM environment we're calling EVM Plus. This is one thing that we're really excited for this year because it combines, as the name says, it combines EVM plus substrate. So combining the thing that Gavin Wood invented first for Ethereum that's done so well and kind of been implemented across all these layer one chains, but combining that with kind of the what we think is the next generation of blockchain development, which is this substrate framework. So allowing teams building these Ethereum compatible applications to also interact at a lower level outside of the kind of confines of the EVM with things that we're building at the blockchain level. So that's a lot of information, but that's really what that's what we're launching over the next few months, and really just going to go from there.
Yeah, I mean, you just to unpack some of that stuff a little bit more. The DEX is a really important part of, I think, any of these new chain ecosystems, and I've been hearing a lot of people desiring a strong DEX offering for Polkadot. So it's really great to hear that that's coming soon. What are some of the last kind of things that you guys are doing to prepare for that, or is it just going smoothly? Are you guys running into any roadblocks there, or like what are the last few hurdles you have before that kind of goes live?
Yeah, for the DEX, there's some just logistical things with. So this is all going to be going through on-chain governance. So there's just like we need to get proposals put forward, get the vote done, and then decide what we're going to put forward as liquidity rewards on that initial pair. Another thing that we're looking at in terms of just kind of roadblocks and challenges is kind of unique to the Polkadot ecosystem, because since we are connected to Polkadot and we kind of rely and depend on Polkadot's tech, one thing that all the parachain teams are waiting on right now is what's called XCM, or cross-chain messaging. This is kind of fundamental to Polkadot and the ability to have cross-chain token transfers between these blockchains or parachains without the clunky wrapping across bridges. That's yeah. One of the key aspects to building on Polkadot. For our liquid dot staking product that I mentioned, we have to be able to send dot between our parachain and the Polkadot relay chain. And until XCM is completely finished, we can't do that. In the meantime, we've built our own basically one-way bridge from the Polkadot relay chain to Acala, so we'll be able to allow people to start using that product. But that's just an example of it's pretty complex when you're building out these engineering timelines, and it's not only our internal dependencies, but there's also these external like Polkadot related dependencies. So yeah, that's a couple examples of kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, I guess you kind of articulate the difficulty of relying on the chain for certain features, but also the flexibility of Polkadot and the parachains and being able to do a lot of what you want to do on your own parachain. But I guess to some extent there is still a limit to what you can do. It's not like Bitcoin where you actually have to like convince every miner in the world to change the rules of the blockchain, but there's still some like requirements for the main chain to do things that allow you to build out the products you want to build.
Yeah.
When you talk about those trade-offs internally, do you ever think like, well, maybe we should just wait until the experience is like really smooth? Or do you guys always think like, okay, there's going to be kind of this transition period where the product's not exactly what we want, but we're going to like migrate people into this final version eventually? Or how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think if you asked like a parity dev, they'd probably smirk if you ask them about Acala, because we don't wait on anything. We're continuing to push. Yeah. So that example that I just gave, like, okay, we can't transfer dot between Acala and Polkadot. Well, we're going to build our own bridge so that we can in the meantime while we wait on that tech to be built. So that's the approach we're taking, is we want to start providing value to our users as soon as possible and let people start using this. So we're going to keep pushing with that, and also relying on the experience that we've got from doing all this stuff already on Kusama using our network Karura. So one benefit of that model is that this is our second time doing all of this stuff. So we feel pretty confident in being able to push out these products right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you guys are confident and able to do that. I think a lot of the other project teams probably follow your lead and look at what you guys are doing as kind of like the trailblazers of the space. One of the other things you mentioned there in your comments earlier was the liquid dot staking, which I think is pretty awesome. I mean, I hate to toot our own horn, but we have instant unstaking at Kraken.
Yeah,
Obviously that's not on chain, right? Like we have to kind of manage that ourselves, but it certainly is one of the most appreciated features on Kraken is that you can instantly get in and out of your staked positions. And most
exactly.
places don't offer that because they have to deal with the bonding period on chain. And that's not just for Polkadot. Obviously, there's other chains that have that issue as well. But it's really cool that you guys are offering that directly. I think it's going to be super popular.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, we're kind of talking about almost two different groups of people, because people who are staking on chain and like trying to use this liquid LDOT token to earn more yield in DeFi, that's a pretty complex,
mhm.
advanced user. Like my dad, my aunt, and soon my grandma will all be staking their dot on Kraken. So a lot of people are using Kraken for that reason, because it really makes it super easy for the user, and really simple. And like you said, the instant unbonding is really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you build these products out, you learn that there's still a pretty big gulf of distance between a consumer like new to crypto person who wants to start doing these things and like the kind of person who's going to take liquid liquid dot and start moving it into other protocols and do all kinds of funky stuff with it, right? But it's coming. I mean, I hear more people asking, well, what is staking? What does that mean? What can I do with that? Because I mean, really, the next evolution of these financial products really is like it's not just about holding. Like I think we've kind of drilled that into people's heads. Like buy the coin, hold on to it, it'll be worth something. But now it's like, well, now I want yield on top.
I
Like
know.
that's like the no-brainer request, right? It's like, well, that's not good enough. I mean, a savings account should earn interest, right? Like these are similar concepts that people can grasp. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
become the expectation now. Is like if there's a token that doesn't have staking, like you're just going to get constantly asked like when staking. So it's definitely a little bit more complex. And what I'm hoping is people can start building products on top of these protocols that we've built. Like LDOT, for example, it requires some steps still. So you stake your dot, and then you could take that LDOT and maybe, for example, like provide liquidity in the DEX using LDOT and DOT. And you're going to be earning trading fees from the decentralized exchange and potentially liquidity rewards. But what if a team came in and said, well, we'll do all that for you. Just come in and stake your dot. And in the background, all that stuff that I just walked you through might be happening, but the user doesn't have to know it, and they can still earn that, whatever the interest is, 10% or 20%. So I think it's going to be interesting when people come in and build applications on top of Acala and leverage everything that we've built as a foundation for this kind of DeFi ecosystem to flourish.
Yeah, I agree, and I think people underappreciate how difficult it is to go from like this really nascent technology to like a Uniswap type experience where it's just like you pick a coin, you swap, done. I mean, it took so long to get there from Bitcoin and kind of the beginnings of that, and I think Polkadot has a lot of complexity that it's still taking time to just get it functional and like prove that it can be done, and then that user experience that's really polished and that people understand and can really become it can really scale out. Still kind of off in the distance a little bit, but I'm glad you mentioned that because you had a pretty epic tweet thread recently. I think it was yesterday or maybe earlier today, where you talked a lot about the EVM kind of plus concept that you mentioned. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of articles in the news recently that I've seen that kind of talk a little bit about how Polkadot is maybe a little bit, not as it's a little behind, some of these other layer one networks that are coming out like Avalanche and Solana and others. But I don't know. I don't really get the sense, like understanding Polkadot, that that's really the case. I think that there's just a lot more under the covers. It's not exactly just an EVM clone. There's a lot more to it. So EVM plus the benefits of substrate, like what does that get developers? Why is that
Yeah.
powerful?
Yeah, I've actually been talking about this recently too. What you just mentioned around just is Polkadot behind or is it not? And the reality is that like Polkadot is just this, like we always say, layer zero. But these parachains are where the actual action happens, which is why I wanted to come to Acala in the first place, because this is where all the users are and all the applications will be. And look what we're talking about. We're still launching. So, January 2022, this is really when Polkadot's starting. So look at Ethereum. It took, what, 5-6 years for DeFi to even become a thing. Terra's been killing it recently, and they launched in January 2018. I think people just forget, like, these things take some time to develop. So we're really excited. There's a lot of great teams launching on Polkadot, and we're all kind of working together to build this ecosystem out. And just focusing, keeping our heads down, and continuing to build. As far as the EVM Plus, yeah, this is going to be really, really interesting and exciting, I think, for developers who are used to building multi-chain and kind of just hopping from one EVM to the next, where the chain, maybe it's a little bit faster, maybe the fees are lower, but you're still working with the same Ethereum environment and the restrictions that come with that. We've had to be pretty patient on the kind of the business or marketing side, and waiting on our developers to finish this. But the patience is going to pay off, because we're really betting on the fact that developers will be able to innovate outside of the confines of the EVM. So what that'll allow people to do is still build their current EVM compatible applications that may have already launched on something like Ethereum or something like Phantom or Polygon. But what they can do is basically, it's called precompiled smart contracts, but basically leveraging things that we've built at the substrate layer. So just to paint an example of that, if you're building, let's say, a money market in our EVM Plus, and you want to offer the ability to pay gas fees in any token. So let's say you're an Ethereum user and you send your ETH, from your MetaMask into your Polkadot account through MetaMask still, and then you go to use Acala. Instead of having to find ACA and learn what ACA is and deposit that into your account to pay that first fee, you would be able to pay your first fee in that money market using the ETH that's already in your wallet. And what actually happens is, like we talked about this DEX that we're building. One thing to keep in mind is that this isn't a typical DEX that's an application. This is a DEX that's built into our chain. So what that allows is back-end functionality. So when that fee is going to be paid by that user, to make it really seamless for them to come into the Acala money market, on the back end, that ETH is actually getting sent down to the DEX in our chain and swapped without the user knowing for ACA, and then that ACA is then goes on and pays that fee for the user. So I've had some clunky experiences trying to go use other layer ones, where you get there and then you just hit this roadblock. You have to go to an exchange, find that token, send it to MetaMask, and then you can get started. So that's just one small example of what you can do when you combine the EVM and then other substrate functionality below.
So when you say like you could send ETH like directly to it on the chain, so are you saying that they're like literally Ethereum addresses on like Acala nodes that can like listen for payments to that, and they can just like, how does that work?
Yeah.
Is it like a bridge, or is it like even more native than that?
Yeah. So the way it'll work is, if you've been on, like, let's say Uniswap or Aave, like in the upper right corner, it'll say, would you like to switch from Ethereum to Polygon to Avalanche? And then it'll say Acala. So like, it'll just be a matter of switching that network. And then it's the same functionality. So if you're going to fund your MetaMask, there will be a bridge where you can just send the ETH from, let's say, your ETH MetaMask over to the Acala side. And then immediately from there, your MetaMask can interact with the application that you're running on Acala. The other kind of crazy part is that you can also go the other way. So you can go from substrate up to the MetaMask. So native substrate assets, like native DOT, you can just immediately use in your MetaMask if it's in your Polkadot wallet, because those wallets will essentially be kind of tied together one-to-one. So DOT assets can go into the Ethereum world, and then Ethereum assets can go into the Polkadot or substrate world. So it makes it super easy for developers because their users that are used to using MetaMask don't have to learn a new tool or download a new tool. But for Polkadot native people, they can still interact with these applications using Polkadot JS, the Polkadot native extension, if they want.
So one of the kind of beefs that I've had with this whole, like the whole crypto space in general, is like this like very deep dependency on MetaMask, and I understand it's kind of become the de facto app, but it just seems like that experience, like jumping between the different networks, is still kind of clunky. I mean, like, have you guys thought internally about like how that situation might improve, and like ways you guys might be able to help solve that, or are you aware of other projects working to like try and like fix that experience? Because I know you're not the only projects that probably suffer that kind of challenge.
Yeah. The Polkadot ecosystem's in a little bit of a unique situation because Polkadot JS, unfortunately, was really only built with developers in mind and not with users in mind. So for us, MetaMask is actually going to be a much smoother experience for our users versus Polkadot JS because a lot of people already know how to use MetaMask and it's not as complex as a tool like Polkadot JS. Um, to Polkadot JS's credit, it's dealing with a whole universe of like up to 100 blockchains, so it's much more complex to build a wallet like that versus MetaMask, which is just interacting with one chain at a time. So that's one thing. There's a team called Talisman in the Polkadot ecosystem who is doing their best to build a really kind of user focused and good user experience wallet for the Polkadot ecosystem. So it'll be interesting to watch how they develop and what kind of strategy they take, whether they try to compete with MetaMask or complement MetaMask. That's still kind of up to them. In terms of MetaMask and kind of the EVM, I've been talking to some developers, especially as we get closer to launching our EVM. And I'm not technical, but I'm trying to understand like where is the industry going? Everyone's implementing this EVM on all these different layer ones, and there's other kind of potential programming languages and I guess tool sets like Wasm being probably the most talked about in terms of what could be coming on the horizon. But I've talked to some of the best Polkadot or Substrate developers, and what I'm hearing is that EVM is probably going to be the go-to for at least the next like 4 or 5 years in comparison to something like Wasm. So that may happen down the road, but it does seem like the reason why all these ecosystems are making such a bet on the EVM is that it's probably going to be the go-to environment for dApp developers for quite some time.
Yeah, it certainly feels like that. I mean, there's just too much traction in that area to kind of get thrown away at this point. So I think most people have to learn to play ball with it. But I do think that bolting on additional, like substrate capabilities will give developers a little bit of extra, expanded capabilities to do what they want to do. As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, you're the chief growth officer. You can't talk about growth without talking about the market and your potential customer base. Right now, as of Wednesday, January 26th, the markets are bleeding pretty red these days. Some say we're heading into a bear market. Some say we're already there. Some say it's just a lull. But when you're trying to grow a brand new chain like this, I mean, what are some of the challenges that you're running up against? I mean, I know you guys have some like amazing investors. You got Coinbase Ventures, Arrington, Polychain, with Olaf and DCG and stuff. I mean, great backing. You got some interesting partnerships. You have one coming up with, or one that's already going on with the Chive, which if people aren't familiar with that, it's like one of the funniest sites on the internet. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you see your role as a growth lead and some of the challenges you're facing as we kind of head into a tougher market than we've seen in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually came into crypto getting close to 4 years ago. So I came in like right at the peak of 2018, January 2018, and then built through and went through like a crazy experience going through like the first bear market that I had ever experienced. And then now, yeah, I've kind of learned to just not even, you look at it sometimes, but you you have to ignore it if you're in the industry. Like I'm taking a 10-year bet on crypto. I'm not worried about what's happening week by week. So it doesn't really matter to me at this point. If anything, the real builders in the industry actually enjoy times like this because you can finally just keep your head down and work, and all the people that are just here for the green candles are going to go away if this actually, I don't know, turns out to be a bear market. Yeah, and it's also been really interesting, like to see some of the narratives play out, like the stock to flow model. Like people aren't really talking about it, but that's been invalidated basically. So it's going to be interesting to see, what plays out at a macro, like those people who are more technical analysts, like what actually plays out as being the true model for this. And then it's also been proven recently that crypto is still very much tied to macro markets. A lot of this has been driven by inflation worries and even like geopolitical stuff that's been happening recently. So although the market is definitely more mature, which I think will lead to if there were to be like a Bitcoin crash, like there's so much, in my opinion, just so much smart money that's been waiting for that, where there's no way that we can have a bear market that's as long and as like dramatic as the 2018 one. So that's just, I don't know, that's just some random thoughts. With the way we're thinking, we're not worried about the markets at all. We're just getting started and really building for the long term. So like you said, on the growth side, I'm working on both marketing and business development. So I need to go pretty soon. I've got an interview for a BD person soon, and hiring up that team, and then the marketing side as well, working a lot on education and helping out our users. On the partnership side, yeah, like a couple things we're excited about. Building out the DeFi ecosystem in our EVM Plus environment, and then that'll lead to other kind of, I guess, more Web 2 or traditional company integrations. So you mentioned the Chive. We're working with a company called Venkman, who is basically building out a lot of these loyalty point programs and NFT platforms for major enterprises, including the Chive, who's got like 10 million monthly active users and has like these Chive points, but they're going to tokenize that and give Chive points to people, and then start doing a lot with NFTs. Even redemptions for their swag store, and they just have a merchandise store for all their fans. That's going to be really cool to launch. The other thing that I'm excited about is to get our integration with Current.com live. So this is our integration with Current, who's a New York-based fintech company with about 3 million customers using it for savings accounts, but using Acala as a backend. We're going to be generating yield for Current that they can then pass on to their customers in the form of yield, but without touching things like MetaMask and public and private keys. So similar to how you guys are providing a really easy user experience at Kraken, Current is doing the same for their fintech customers, but just generating yield from Acala, which will be really, really interesting.
Well, you just mentioned a ton of things that I probably could talk to you for a couple more hours about, but I know you're a busy man and you got a lot going on. So I just want to say thank you so much for stopping by again and giving us an update on everything Acala and giving us your thoughts on some of the stuff going on in the market. Really appreciate you taking the time. So thank you so much for joining the podcast again. Yep. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Huge thank you to our guest, Dan, for stopping by again, and to you, our listeners. Make sure to like, subscribe, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. And until next time, I'm Brian Hoffman, and this has been the Parachain Auctions podcast. This content is not financial or investment advice. All interviews and discussions are opinions only. Kraken does not endorse the accuracy of this content. None of the following information should be construed as a recommendation to support any specific parachain project or to participate in parachain auctions in general. See our terms of service for more information.